Welcome to This Song Is Yours, the podcast where we dive deep into the art of songwriting, chat with some of the most exciting artists in the world, and explore the stories behind their songs. As always, I'm your host, Simon Fink, and thank you very much for joining us. Our guests this week on the podcast are Dice. The indie rock four-piece from Western Australia have built a devoted following across the country on the back of their upbeat, high-octane indie songs about youth, adulthood, and everything in between. Their 2024 debut, Midnight Zoo, took the band to even greater heights, winning over fans here and abroad and sending them across the UK, Europe, and North America on tour. Next week, on July 31st, they return with their sophomore record titled I Thought the Altitude Would Make It Worth the View. Recorded in LA with famed producer Joe Chiccarelli, the man behind albums from artists like The White Stripes, The Shins, and The Strokes, this is a record that expands the sonic palette Dice have been building while also pushing them into new territory lyrically. Today, we're sitting down with Ben Hodge and Tom King from Dice to talk all about the making of I Thought the Altitude Would Make It Worth the View, how working with Joe Chiccarelli helped evolve their creative techniques, and the self-reflective nature of the lyrics across this beautiful new record. Now, we want to say a massive thank you to Rhiannon for her help with today's episode and remind everyone that the brand new Dice record, I Thought the Altitude Would Make It Worth the View, is out next week on July 31st. You will find links in today's show notes on where you can pre-order the record, follow Dice across their socials, and keep up with everything that they have going on. While you are on the show notes, please make sure you subscribe to This Song Is Yours and come follow us on Instagram and on TikTok. It really does help us out. It keeps you across new episodes, guests, and everything else that we have going on in the works. We've also got our playlist feature on our website and our tote bags as merch. So head to thissongisyours.com if you would like to check out either of those. But let's get into today's conversation. Here is our chat with Ben and Tom from Dice.
So come for a good time. Alright. I'll never be the sideline.
Please welcome to This Song Is Yours, Ben Hodge and Tom King from Dice. Gentlemen, hello. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Simon. How you doing? How's it going? Thanks for having us.
My absolute pleasure, gentlemen. It's lovely to see you again. We've never actually, I was having a think about it earlier today. We got to hang out at South by Southwest one year in Sydney, but we've never had the pleasure of having you on the podcast. So I'm kind of excited to chat long form with you today and you know, get into it, talk about this new album, talk about touring, you know, actually like get into the weeds with it.
Yeah, awesome. Let's do it. South by God, that's a long time ago. That's like 2 years, maybe 3 years.
I think it
3
was.
years.
I think it was like 2023. That was the one. I think it was a little while ago. So it's been a few years between drinks, but you know, there's plenty been going on between then. There's a for people listening to the podcast, there's a brand new album that's coming out next week on July 31st. Boy, it's the sophomore record. And I want to get into, you know, the recording, the songwriting, Mr. Joe Chiccarelli, because I think that's a big thing as well. But first thing, having a look at the album, I wanted to address, and I'm hoping you'll allow me to, the title. The title of this record is...
Yes.
It's wistful. When reading it, it is bittersweet. There's a little bit of heartbreak in it almost. The record that we're discussing is I Thought the Altitude Would Make It Worth the View. Firstly, congratulations on such a beautiful album, but I'm wondering whether we can kick things off talking about where this title has come from and what made it the right, I guess, overarching thing for it to be the title of the record.
This is actually a bit of a fun fact. That album name was not the original album name, and we were running with a different name for the whole process, and except until like the last maybe 5 days of putting like the finishing touches. And we had the name originally was Mirror Mirror, and because like the album's all about like introspection as well as like reflection and like then breaking out of that and expressing yourself. And we were stoked with the name, but we were just like, I don't know, like there's something about it just didn't sit right. And then one of the tracks off the record, Rooftops, a line in the bridge is, I thought the altitude would make it worth the view. And I just wanted to name the song, Rooftops, that. And I like put it to Hodgie and he was like, oh, I don't know, like it's a bit long. And then I'm like, oh, like think about like records we love, like the old Arctic Monkeys stuff. They've got really long song names. And we ended up going, all right, we'll sit with it and think for a bit. And then we were just like in the room with Joe, just talking about the record and just like, yeah, doing some like final vocal stuff. And then we were like, what do you reckon of these two names? And he was like, oh, well, there's an obvious like choice. He's like, it's just so much cooler. And we were like, okay, cool. You've kind of like helped us make that decision that we've all been like tossing and turning over. And like we had Mirror Mirror locked in pretty much. And we were like, just to hear it from like an outside perspective, because it's such a personal thing to us, the album title, was someone to go, yeah, that's what the songs are best represented by that name, was like such a cool thing. And then so we ran with it.
Especially because the album was quite introspective. It's all about this kind of storyline where you're facing situations where you've kind of put a lot of effort into, and sometimes things don't necessarily work out. And it's all about kind of like realizing that it's like it's not that bad in the like the grand scheme of things. Like a lot of the time, like is a very minor dent, and it's all about accepting that and moving on. So I feel like the title, I'm not going to say it again because it's so long, but it's almost like you've climbed and hiked up to this mountain, and I've left it open to perspective whether like it was worth the view or you were disappointed. But I think the idea was that it was kind of about the journey, and at the end of the day, like you've made it there, and then like everything's actually going to be okay. Like not everything's like all over just because of it. So yeah, it was a nice way to like tie in all these different kind of experiences around that theme into like one album. Yeah.
I think it encapsulates the album really, really well. And it is also good that it is somewhat open-ended. It doesn't really give the listener or the person reading the title it doesn't make their mind up for them. It kind of leaves it open-ended as to whether it actually was or it wasn't. But the questioning in the title, I think, is that beautiful, wistful part of it. Thematically, I know you just touched on that the record is very introspective. There is a lot of self-reflection across a number of the songs on this album. Was that something that going into the process you kind of knew was going to be maybe one of the big themes, or was it almost as you worked on the songs with Joe and you were writing them and recording them that I guess like a through line kind of revealed itself to show that that's what was going on with these songs?
I think I have a very large tendency to write songs that are very personable and like within ourselves, but I always try to express them as if I was trying to talk about a girl or talk about people or a situation like that. But I think I come from a very like deep part of me where I always write about our own experiences and almost writing to ourselves rather than writing about other people. And I think with like this album especially, we kind of spanned out a little bit from that, and I definitely took more inspiration from the other boys versus myself. But I think especially with Joe, like with what the album, with the like what the kind of titles meant and what each song meant, he really helped with the kind of process of writing to encapsulate what each song was about. And I think it definitely comes out and is very visible in each like individual song while still tying together.
Yeah, and I think as well, we didn't really have like a agenda, so to speak, going into the album, but we definitely wanted to come out with a more positive, if that's the right word, project than Midnight Zoo, our first album. Because if you sort of look back 3 or 4 years when we were sort of writing that album and working on it, we were all going through some darker times on a personal side. And so the kind of finished product was obvious. It was just a contextual thing. It was obviously a lot darker. The songs are generally a bit sadder, and they're just a bit more moody. And so we did kind of, so all of Ben's stories that he was telling, we sort of really wanted to create this freeing experience through the record.
Yeah, definitely. At the same time, I always kind of keep it open and a bit open to kind of perspective, because I want everyone to kind of take away their own meanings. I feel like if we go too in depth with our own particular experiences, sometimes you can't really relate. But while we really try and like encapsulate that kind of like adolescent upbringing and all the like experiences and feelings you get with that, I feel like I really wanted to kind of get people to be able to like adapt their own stories into what we're writing about.
100%. There is a certain almost like levity to these songs, I feel, and that is no disrespect to that first debut record, Midnight Zoo. I think that there is almost like an air of, not to be cliche, but letting go in some of these songs. You can tell that there's a bit more playfulness in them, I want to say. There's a bit more, trying different things sonically. There's a few more synths across this record, which was really exciting. Did you know that was going to be a part of the sophomore record? I know everyone kind of talks about, that difficult second record, wherever it may be. Was there wanting to try new things and experiment with different sounds for the band?
Definitely. I think for the first time ever, we actually we're like, okay, we're like making a project. Let's like actually think about this. Like we went and bought like a 3x2 meter piece of plywood from Bunnings and like literally mind mapped. And this is like probably this time last year, maybe a bit earlier when we were starting to sort of craft the idea of a record together. And we wrote down like goals and what we wanted to achieve, things we wanted to try, like things we liked about the first record, things we liked about other bands, and all this melting pot of what we wanted the record to be. So yeah, there was definitely some ideas and stuff that we wanted to try. But I think one thing, and I'm sure we'll go into the actual recording process a bit later, but that we did on this record was we live tracked most of the records. So every single song is the four of us in the room, and I'd say like we did a few different takes and stuff, so there's a bit of chopping and changing, but 80% of each song is just like the four of us in the room jamming it out and like having a good time. And someone makes a mistake, you see someone laugh across the room, and like it was really encapsulated that fun energy of what Dice was and still is. But yeah, we definitely went back to the roots a little bit.
I kind of love that though. I think that there is a certain energy that can be captured when you've got a band or like for lack of a better term, a machine almost that is as well kind of oiled and knows what they're doing as a band like Dice. When you are in the studio and being able to record live to tape or live, it does have a certain energy. That there are certain, I feel like sometimes little tiny mistakes can also give songs character. It gives them like a little bit of a more tangible thing to hold on to. If it's too sheen, if it's too slick, it's almost like the being too specific with lyrics. There's no relatability to it in an oral sense. I do want to talk about this recording because I do want to talk about Joe Chiccarelli, which incredible producer. I'm not going to lie. When first chatting about getting you guys on the pod and having a chat with the person that has connected us today, when I saw the name Joe Chiccarelli, there was a bit of an excitement as a elder millennial, let's say. A number of albums that came through my upbringing have been made by that man. We've got the White Stripes, we've got the Shins, Wincing the Night Away, the Strokes, like countless other records. How did that opportunity, firstly, let's, I guess, work out how Joe got into the picture. How did that kind of come about?
So our manager and label, Sam Ford at Tone City Records, he sort of put that together. So pretty much all of our music up until this record we'd recorded with him, and we'd expressed to him that like obviously we love recording with him and stuff, but we sort of felt we wanted to try something new and he was like all for it, and he was like, yeah, let me find that like some people, and sort of he put out some feelers here and there and spoke to some different producers like James Ford, who did the Fontaines album, was one of them. Unfortunately, that couldn't make that work, like Mike Crossy and stuff, and ended up landing with Joe. And Joe was like from the get-go really, really invested in the project. Like when these songs were like really shitty demos, and he like saw something in the songs, and that was sort of like, all right, we're going to go with this guy. Like he's believes in what we're doing, and he obviously is passionate about it, which is like the most important thing, that it's not someone just sort of looking for a paycheck. And so, yeah, and then that we did a few Zoom calls with Joe, and then we met in LA, did some pre-production at a rehearsal studio, and then hit the studio for 6 or 7 days and recorded the album.
I kind of love that though. Did you find that Joe, and I guess the resume that he has from previous work, did you find that not influenced the songwriting, but that there was a melding of that, I guess, in the studio between yourselves and what he can bring to it? I think, what was it? Album track Footprints. There was this outro that is almost like Strokes-esque in a way. If you go back to maybe their second or third record, there was something that I kind of like thought that was something that in my mind crossed both Dice and Joe Chiccarelli like together. Did you find that as it was happening in the room, I guess?
Yeah, definitely. Like
I think
we sort of I'll quickly say one thing.
You go.
Yeah. So like with like all of those songs, like the way we sort of always write songs is like we never write an intro or never write an outro or never write like a B section to this. And so like we're in like the rehearsal room and Joey's like, we need to add some intros, like we got to add some outros and stuff. And so he kind of let us do like what we thought should be like the outro for like Footprints or like the extended outro for Call Me with the fader. And then he would be like, why don't we try like flip the script and like reverse this bit but keep this bit doing the same thing. So there was such a cool element of like workshopping and crafting the songs with him, which was like so fun. Because we've never done that as well either. Like we always just kind of stick with what's like verse, chorus, chorus, bridge, chorus sort of thing without like really being like, oh, maybe we should like intentionally really switch it up, which was really fun.
Yeah, there was definitely a level of like trust that we don't normally have with other people contributing to the songwriting process. I think like I feel like it's just so like very such a fragile, like it's your baby. You don't want people to like mess with it. But I feel like there was definitely a level of trust, both because of his past portfolio of recordings and production, but also just because he was very invested and very kind of particular with things in the song that he knew that had a kind of ability to be something really big. So he kind of like fine-tuned it and really got us like to nitpick some things, which is like definitely where we kind of learned to let go and let him control some things. I feel like it definitely ended up being a massive improvement in a lot of our songwriting for this record.
I kind of love that though. That's where I was going to go next, was like talking about, I guess, what was learned, or like there's always an evolution from album to album with artists and with songwriters, and whether you found that, that I guess the learnings from Joe have now added to the repertoire of the tools that you guys use for songwriting, and whether even now, and we've discussed it with different artists on the podcast before, sometimes we are talking to you about a second album. You're probably maybe already writing a third, possibly fourth. Who knows how many songs you might have in that back pocket of yours at the moment. But whether that's translated into like a new approach for how the band operates now post recording with Joe.
Yeah, I think a lot of the, especially being like kind of the person who writes the kind of bones for these songs, I feel like in our past, we have a very large tendency to kind of come in with an acoustic, just like start to finish song with nothing really like crazy in terms of structure or anything. But I feel like, especially introducing keys and lead lines now, especially in this record, I feel like definitely impacted the way we started to write music, kind of spanning away from just the strumming of bar chords, especially for like these verses. And I think it really created this new kind of world we could start writing in, where I would start with just kind of bass key chords, and we could actually develop like a lead line on top of that. And especially the dynamics of things, and realizing that like sometimes like faster and louder doesn't really mean it's going to like an upbeat song. Sometimes slower is faster. And I feel like these kind of little lessons were something that we found out during this recording process. Like especially like having more space means sometimes it's okay to not have a strumming guitar in the verse and to like just let it go down to being drums and bass. And I think, it definitely affected how we kind of view songs, and definitely like dynamics, especially in the live recordings. I feel like it opens up a lot more exciting songwriting for whatever's to come after this record.
Yeah, I think Hodge is pretty much spot on with all that. Like another big thing is like we're normally like so nitpicky, like with like single notes in like a guitar solo or a guitar riff. And when you've got like four people who've got like, plus a producer who've got like four different ideas of how the song should sound, and whether it's the end of this line should sound happy or sad or whatever, we'd sit there like before this record for hours and just like argue over like a single note. And Joe was kind of like, cut the bullshit, like pretty much like said it like that. Like as soon as he saw any signs of it, he's like, we're making a record here. And he kind of helped us like get that perspective of like the bigger picture, which was like definitely like something that we've all spoken about individually, that we learned from the process.
I think that there's something to be said though about obviously the love and care that you all put into it, that there's a reason why arguments might take hours in terms of certain notes or whatever it is, because it is a very important project, and obviously a very important thing to yourselves in relation to it. But I love that obviously with any new record, with any evolution of sound, there is like an evolution of how you approach things. And with songwriting, I'm wondering whether you guys might share, like we are, as always, predominantly a songwriting podcast, whether you'd take us back to the beginning of Dice and how you guys started writing songs together and where that kind of met, and I guess how it did evolve to the point that it's at now. And Tom, whether you wanted to kick us off with this.
Well, so Dice kind of started as just me and Hodgie in back in 2020. I just moved out to a share house like literally a month before COVID hit. And so we couldn't work or anything. So Hodgie, well, I was working from home, but Hodgie wasn't working. He'd come out and just hang out with me during the day, and I'd kind of just like slack off work and we just drink beers and play pool. And then we like always played music together, but like for like 5 or 6 years, and then but always just covers, like in my parents' garage, just like having fun. And I don't think Hodgie had really written too much material over that time, but then one day he kind of just like came up with Reality, and we were just strumming chords in the backyard. Like I've got the video on my phone still of like me playing bass, and it's before Reality even had a chorus. And we made it, and we were like, this is actually all right. Like we were kind of both a bit like shocked, like, let's see, like let's keep at it. And then we kind of just like got in a bit of a roll of just like writing like a lot of songs that obviously never saw the light of day, and then some that did. And Hodgie just sort of just would bring in an idea, and I'd go, cool, let's make this. Like my advice to the song would be like, I want to relate to this song more, so let's change these lines or this section sort of thing. And I think that's like was a really cool thing to be able to have bounce ideas off someone who was like Ben, who is a really great songwriter, and me, who myself is more like of a listener to music, if that makes sense. And then to be able to bounce those ideas off each other was super fun. And then now our process is sort of more Hodgie orientated, and he'll sort of like craft the idea and then bring it to us, and then we sort of put our sort of like little bells and whistles and give our 2 cents on stuff here and there. But there's just a lot of trust in the process everywhere, whether it's me creating the guitar lines or Ben creating the lyrics. So, yeah.
Ben, was it always lyrics that you were kind of drawn to in terms of songwriting, or like was that a process that you found, I guess, interesting to approach after that initial kind of like discovering the songwriting part with Tom?
It was actually, I never really paid too much attention lyrically until like that first song. Actually, in fairness, I wrote a few songs before we started writing Reality. I was always inspired by like quite slow music. Like I loved listening to like Matt Corby, Sam Smith, Adele, like these kind of like slow ballads. I was always drawn to. And I guess because of like the first song being about this sudden heartbreak that Tom dealt with, and like it was just like the week before we were going through this like whole heartbreak situation, and I found like a lot of passion in just writing about it in my own way and kind of putting in all these kind of subtle references to what's happened at night without kind of letting like too much get away. So people kind of read a lot of the lyrics but sometimes not really understand it. But like it was one of those things where I was like, I know Tom's gonna know what I'm talking about, and I know what I'm talking about. And I feel like it became this kind of little game for me where I kind of found like a lot of interest in doing that. And I think it was probably around that first our debut album, Midnight Zoo, was when I kind of really started to hone in on kind of maturing my lyricism and kind of making things more structured in a way where I could actually appeal to a larger audience. I kind of took away a little bit from what I used to do, where I kind of put in all these kind of like subtle references, and I kind of made it more applicable into this storyline of what I was trying to achieve, which was at that time a lot of kind of darker stuff that we were facing. And I feel like there was a lot of like mature development since then, but I feel like the passion's still there, where I've always loved to write about our own experiences. And I feel like that's where the emotion really is adapted. But yeah, like ever since we started, like I've always loved writing lyrics. I've never really gotten too in depth with the kind of investigating other people's lyrics. I've never really like tried to adapt other people's lyricism onto myself, because I've never really kind of enjoyed that, so I never really did it. But it's like always been a fun kind of self journey of finding out what or how I want to write songs, if that makes sense. Yeah.
100%. We've had the great pleasure of talking to many a songwriter on this podcast, and it's one of those things that you speak about, like being inspired by maybe certain songwriters or artists or whatever it may be, but you can't, like, guitar tones or techniques are one thing that you kind of can pick up and maybe apply to a song, but writing lyrics is just a totally different thing because it's got to feel authentic to yourself, and it's got to feel authentic to Tom, and it's got to feel authentic to the band itself in Dice. Like if it's, you know, you're picking up Pitbull, and I don't know why he was the first person that came into my head. I apologize, but like if you're picking up something like that,
we love Pitbull.
Look, how many four Mr. Worldwides in Dice? Maybe that's the next like a version, but like it's one of those things of like it just wouldn't fit, and it's obviously the way that you and the band make these songs work for Dice. Obviously, it does have that connection for people because there are lots of fans who are really excited about this record, that there's new music out, that you're going to take it on tour. So it's obviously a process that works for yourself.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. It's one of those things where you don't really know how it works, but it just does. Exactly. I think it's just because I'm not like 13 years old. It's now just like imprinted in our nature.
100%. I'm wondering whether you might indulge me just a little bit. Daydream, I thought was a fantastic song on the record. People will have the chance to hear this record next week, and we'll put all the links in the show notes so people to buy the record, stream it, and catch it on tour, which we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, wondering whether you might share some insights on Daydream. I thought that track was a brilliant example of the music that you've done previously and like the bridging of this new album, if that kind of makes sense. Like it's a really good example of both Dice at the same time.
So interesting with everyone's opinions on each song. Like I agree 100%, but like it's just like we did another interview with someone else. They're like, this is my favorite song, or like this is the one that stood out to me. I'm like, I just wouldn't pick that as like a standout thing. So it's really cool, and really, really sick to hear that you're into Daydream. But I'll let Ben take it away.
Yeah, I think lyrically and melodically, I definitely drew back to like how I used to kind of make melodies, which were kind of pop inspired as well as like that surf rock kind of Australian drive. But yeah, it was definitely about being kind of obsessed with social media and seeing this kind of new wave of people get like taken over by social media and lose that like kind of in-person connection. And I think because we had such a strong kind of storyline for it, I feel like we definitely focused way more on how we wanted to make you feel. And I feel like while there's quite like a negative idea of like losing someone to social media, we wanted to kind of see it as like this like liberating, like if you're going to do that, like I'm just going to like do my own thing. I'm going to move on. I'm not going to get like kind of dragged down with you. And Tom, do you want to talk about the instrumentation?
Yeah, I think this was like one that came together in like a pretty weird way. Like we actually demoed the song originally like in like a live tracking set. It's the way it sounds now. And then we went and like flipped it to like a minor key. And we had like a really late night in the studio, and we were like, let's just like try rework this song and make it like real dark and moody. Cause like that, as like Ben was sort of saying before, like one thing we've really focused on for the record was like, we wanted to make the song sound like the lyrics, or like feel like the feeling of the lyrics and the instrumentation match. Anyway, that didn't end up happening. We went back to the original. And then this one is like pretty stripped back as far as like instruments and stuff go. Like it's very, very like Strokes inspired, like with sort of my single note sort of stuff. Trying to think, Daydream. Oh yeah, then the synth. There's that little cool little synth lick that Ben added that I think Lenny and maybe Regan, when they walked into the room, walked out because they hated it so much. But now they love it. It was just like the perfect encapsulation of like us having fun in the studio. Like Joe was in the chair, I was on the couch, Hodgie like did it, and I'm like, that is so dumb. We have to put that in the song. And then it ended up staying, and then Yeah, I think it's just like it's probably the most like guitar heavy like rock track in the record, and like especially in the bridge, which is one of my favorite parts of the record, where we're just like all just like down strumming, like chugging the power chords before that sort of like final release of that last like really like punchy chorus.
Look, it is a fantastic track, and I loved it. Obviously, maybe born from something that wasn't as serious, but that has obviously grown legs itself, and now is on the record and will be heard by everyone. It's a beautiful track and a beautiful album. So, guys, I do want to say congratulations on the record. It is going to be out next week for people to purchase, as I said. So we'll make sure that there are links for people to buy the record, that they've got an opportunity to go and buy tickets to the Altitude tour, which also kicks off, I think, a week or so after this, at the start of August. But I do want to say thank you very much, Ben and Tom, for coming onto the podcast. The album is called I Thought the Altitude Would Make It Worth the View. Incredible record from Dice. But gentlemen, yeah, thank you again for coming on to have a chat.
Thanks so much, Simon. Really appreciate it. That was awesome.